Halloweentown was a made-for-TV film series that followed the Piper family, which was made up of Marnie, the oldest sibling, her younger brother Joey, and their younger sister Sophie. The movies followed these siblings as they learned how to deal with the fact that they weren't full humans like they thought. Marnie had always loved Halloween and everything surrounding the magical holiday, so it wasn't shocking that she was happy when she overheard her mother talking to Aggie Cromwell, their grandmother, who happened to be a witch who lived in a place called Halloweentown. The first movie of the series was released by Disney on October 17, 1998. And as you know, it mainly focused on Marnie as she learned the secret of her family and followed her grandmother back to Halloweentown, where she would learn to be a true Cromwell witch. Halloweentown seemed like such a magical place. It was noted as the only place that monsters and supernatural beings could be themselves and live what they would consider to be normal lives. However, shortly after she arrived, Marnie learned of an evil plot that was going to turn Halloweentown against the mortal world, and she knew that even though she hadn't been properly trained, it was up to Marnie and her siblings to save both Halloweentown and her home. The movie ended up doing really well for a straight-to-TV Disney movie, and it actually got 3 sequels, the last of which ended up switching actresses for Marnie, which upset a lot of fans and saw the numbers plummet compared to its predecessors. The first sequel, Halloweentown 2, Calabar's Revenge, however, did just as well as the first film in the series, which was impressive for sequels at the time. One of the coolest things about Halloweentown 2 is actually something that was discovered not too long ago and brought to light by a Tik Tocker. They had apparently been rewatching the series, which is always a fun thing to do, especially around the spooky months, and they noticed something towards the end of the film that had them thinking. And upon investigating it further, it seems like there may have been an Easter egg in the movie that connects the Halloweentown universe to the universe of another one of Disney's Halloween classics, Hocus Pocus. The supposed Easter egg discovered by the TikTok user was found in Halloween 2, Calabar's Revenge, as we mentioned before. This sequel to the original was released in 2001, 3 years after the first film, and it took place 2 years after the first film. We find out at the beginning that Marnie had spent the past 2 years training with her grandma Aggie, attempting to master the art of witchcraft. Much like the first movie, the events of the movie took place on the evening of Halloween. Marnie's family had been hosting a mortal Halloween party for the neighborhood, and they ended up meeting a new person in the area named Cal. The two seemed to hit it off, as Marnie showed him around the house before bringing him into her grandmother's room. That was when we found out that Cal was up to something, because when Marnie turned her back, he snatched her grandmother's spellbook. Now, Marnie had to return to Halloweentown with Aggie, where the two attempted to locate Aggie's second spellbook. Upon arriving, they discovered that the giant jack-o'-lantern in the middle of the town was gone and replaced by a giant stone cube, and everyone in town had begun to lose their color and turn into their depiction of boring humans. Marnie and Aggie knew that something bad was happening, and that it had somehow been related to the spellbook that Cal stole. However, by the time Marnie found out that it was Cal who had betrayed them, it was too late. Her grandmother had already begun to turn into a normal, boring human and had lost her color, meaning, once again, it was up to her and her siblings to save Halloweentown. Only this time, her siblings were back in the mortal world. After getting some help from her old pal and nemesis Luke, Marnie managed to find a way to turn back the spell, as well as use her strong Cromwell magic to open a door between Halloweentown and the mortal world. Once back with her family, they were able to take down Cal and begin the process of turning all of the people in Halloweentown back into supernatural beings. This is when the Tik Tocker noticed the amazing Easter egg. Towards the end of the film, we saw Marnie's younger sister, Sophie, who has improved a lot as a witch since the beginning of the series, as she was running through Halloweentown repeating the spell over and over again that would lift the curse on all of the citizens that she passed. As she was returning everyone back into their colorful supernatural selves, she passes one woman that ended up turning back into a witch, which normally wouldn't have been too odd. But after the TikToker pointed out the outfit that the witch was wearing, she had tons of people wondering if they were possibly looking at a nod to the Sanderson sisters. You see, when the woman turns back into her witchy self, her clothes are almost immediately recognizable. Actually, it was more than just her clothes. It was her whole vibe. It just screamed Sanderson's sister. She even appeared to be wearing the same type of dress that was red and sparkly that we saw Sarah Sanderson wearing in Hocus Pocus, along with almost the same exact purple robe. When looking at the two characters side by side, it's almost uncanny how close their outfits are to one another. And once this was pointed out by the TikToker, fans began to go nuts. I mean, how crazy would it be if after more than 20 years since both films were released, that we found out they took place in the same universe? Plus, most Disney and or Halloween fans have seen the movie Hocus Pocus and absolutely loved it, despite the critics' opinion that the movie was going to be a flop. As for those of you who might not have seen it, the Halloween classic took place in the town of Salem, Massachusetts, and it followed Max Dennison, a kid from California who had just moved there with his family. It was the day of Halloween, and after being forced to take his little sister Danny trick-or-treating, the two of them found themselves spending the night fleeing from the Sanderson Sanderson sisters, three witches who terrorized the area back in the 1600s. And as we mentioned briefly, critics believed the movie was going to flop, but they could not have been more wrong. The movie was an instant classic and is still watched by thousands and thousands of people throughout the month of October. And now it looks like, at least according to the Tik Tocker, that Hocus Pocus might even take place in the same universe as Halloweentown, another Halloween classic by Disney that was expected to flop but ended up doing exceedingly well. Now, this certainly is an interesting discovery made by the TikTok user. However, there are some fans who find it to be a bit of a stretch and believe it to be less of an Easter egg and more of a coincidence due to the way the movie ended up being produced. You see, as we mentioned before, both of the films were assumed by critics to flop and not make much money. Well, unfortunately for Halloweentown, that meant budget cuts. Originally, the film was slated to have an impressive budget, believe it or not. Before it was cut, the budget for the first Halloweentown film was originally set at $30 million. However, after critics claimed the movie would do poorly, the executives and investors decided to cut that budget down by more than 80%, and it ended up only being $4 million. And a lot of that money most likely came out of the costume and special effects budget. This is leading some fans to believe that the witch that we saw wearing Sarah Sanderson's outfit wasn't a deliberate Easter egg, and that the dress and robe may have just been what the costume department could get their hands on. But if you are a full believer in this newfound Easter egg, don't worry, because like in most cases, there are two sides to this argument. Much like there are some who think the costume was a coincidence due to the budget cuts, there are others who think there is more to the Easter egg than just the dress. And the deeper that we looked into the theory, we actually found some more interesting things that may tie the witch in Halloweentown to the witches in Hocus Pocus. As we spoke about before, the dress and the purple robe are basically a perfect match for Sarah's in Hocus Pocus. Both of the dresses seem to have lighter colored lacy sleeves, with the lower portion of the dress being a deep red and a patterned bodice on top. Well, what if we told you that there was more to it than that? Take a look at the witch herself. Doesn't she almost resemble a combination of the three sisters? I mean, we already spoke about her wardrobe and how it is a spot-on match for Sarah, but take a look at the witch's hair real quick. Within a second, you probably noticed how close it looks to Winifred's in terms of color, and the fact that though Winifred's hair was up, they both appear to be quite curly. As for Mary, the more that we looked at the bodice that the witch in Halloweentown was donning, it seemed to us to resemble that of Mary Sanderson's more than her sister's. With that being said, we've come to an interesting theory as to how the Easter egg might connect the two classic films. You see, we think that there is a possibility that the three witches used the last of their powers and used it to cast some sort of combination spell that morphed them into one witch that we saw at the end of the second Halloweentown. And after transforming and somehow escaping Salem, they somehow ended up in Halloweentown, where they didn't have to hide the fact that they were a witch. Whether or not the Easter egg found by the TikToker is more than just a coincidence remains to be seen. But regardless, it sure is neat to think about, and it makes the anticipation for Hocus Pocus 2 even stronger. And what's even cooler is that if it is in fact an Easter egg for Hocus Pocus that was found in Halloweentown, then perhaps there is a Halloweentown Easter egg hidden inside of Hocus Pocus. Though we haven't heard of one yet, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, just that it hasn't been found. Now, if you happen to know of an Easter egg for Halloweentown hidden in Disney's Hocus Pocus, please let us know in the comments section. We would love to hear it. As for right now, that's all, Disney fans. Let us know what video you'd like to see next in the comments, and like and subscribe for more magically packed videos.